Welcome to Leigh Dickey TV. Hit subscribe to follow along with the fun. Now let's get on to today's video. Back to the Future 4 doesn't need to happen. I give you my reasons why next. Alright, so Back to the Future, the franchise, one of the most beloved film franchises and media franchises ever, not just of the 80s, even though the films did come out. I think the first one came out in 85. Second one came out in 90, and the second one came out in 89, pardon me, and then the third one I think came out in 1990, directly behind Back to the Future Part 2. One of the most beloved franchises ever. Of course, the films, they star Michael J. Fox, Leah Thompson, Crispin Glover, Tom Wilson, Christopher Lloyd, and a whole host load of others. And they made a ton of money. Robert Zemeckis put him on the map. I mean, like, Hollywood heavy hitters behind this franchise. It is one of the most beloved franchises ever, and ever since the third one's release, Back to the Future Part 3 in 1990, at least that's when I think it was released, the fan base has been clamoring for Back to the Future Part 4, and I am of the mindset, maybe even like 3/4 of the fan base would think the same. I don't know, maybe half would think that Back to the Future 4 doesn't need to happen. And personally, that's just because I think, and I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but I just think that the actors and actresses, they're old now. They're too old to do this. And even if they did the whole, like, a voice thing where they got, it was like, if it was an animated or like a one-off special, I just don't think it's needed because it's such a beloved franchise that most of the fan base has accepted the fact that 4 isn't going to happen. And, you know, Tom Wilson has said in his stand-up specials, and he's a fantastic comedian, he's so funny, where it's like, Back to the Future 4, not happening, because they don't need it to. I don't think the fan base needs it, even though, like, there are portions of the fan base that are clamoring for Back to the Future Part 4. Of course, there was a short-lived animated series that ran for 2 seasons from, I think, 1990 through 1992 on CBS. And it starred Dan Castellaneta, who is the voice of Homer Simpson, as well as many other Simpsons characters, like Mayor Quimby, as Dr. Emmett Brown, the animated form. Christopher Lloyd was doing the live-action segments for that series. But I don't think that Back to the Future 4 needs to happen, just because the 3 films, and I even loved the animated series as a kid, but the 3 films especially, they were perfect. You know, I mean, sure, the third one was set in the Old West, and they brought in that time-traveling train, right? And, you know, the second one was set in the future with the Cubs winning the World Series, even though they were a year off, right? The Cubs actually won the World Series for the first time in 108 years in 2016, and Back to the Future Part 2 is set in 2015 with self-lacing shoes, self-drying vests, flying cars, and all that sort of stuff. We still don't have the self-lacing shoes and or self-drying vests or the flying cars. And to be fair, I think we need them. Like, let's turn this thing into the Jetsons, if you will. But it's just, Back to the Future Part 2 was like just one of those things, you know, about a year off from predicting the Cubs winning the World Series, because as I said, they won it in 2016, whereas the movie Back to the Future Part 2 said that they had won it in 2015. Of course, it's just a spoof, but, you know, it's just cool to see it, right? Like, it's a strange coincidence, but it was cool nonetheless. And of course, the first one, you had Marty going back to basically get his parents to actually get together, right? Or he would just cease to exist. So, and he got to cover Chuck Berry's Johnny B. Good, which is still, that's one of my favorite versions of Johnny B. Good. Like, that performance in the movie was fantastic, right? And getting him to understand, like, who his parents were and how they got together, and, like, who his dad was back in those days. Like, it basically turned their lives around, you know, his actions in Back to the Future. And it was, like, it's just a fantastic franchise. And I'm of the mind that Back to the Future Part 4 just doesn't need to happen, just because the 3 films were perfect. They were amazing. And, you know, they still go to conventions, the actors, Leah Thompson, Tom Wilson, Christopher Lloyd. Like, they've all done panels and stuff. Like, Michael J. Fox still makes appearances. Of course, Michael J. Fox had Spin City, Family Ties, and he was shooting Family Ties and Back to the Future at the same, like the first Back to the Future at the same time. So then you had, like, he was Stuart Little. I think he's done episodes of Boston Public, right? And it's just, like, they all still get work. Leah Thompson, Christopher Lloyd, obviously he had Taxi back in the 80s as well, 70s and 80s as well. And Tom Wilson, Crispin Glover, like, you know, and I think Crispin Glover was in one of the, was it one of the Jason films or one of, yeah, one of the Friday the 13th films. Sorry, I say Jason, I meant Friday the 13th. But it just, you know, those films, that franchise in and of itself is perfect. Like, and I think a lot of people are sort of, they understand that the actors and actresses are getting old, they're getting up there, and it's just, it's late. It's too late for a Back to the Future Part 4. Let's please not reboot this film franchise. We don't need a reboot of Back to the Future. Just because those films are fantastic. Leave them alone. They are perfect. And, you know, a reboot would just taint the original's sort of legacy, or like the love that a lot of, like, millions of people have for Back to the Future, right? Whether it's the franchise or just one, two, or all of the films, even if it's the animated series, which I loved personally, right? It had a great soundtrack. You had Huey Lewis in the News with Power of Love, Back in Time. It was just a fantastic time for those films to be released, and the music too. It just went along with it so well. I will say that, you know, a lot of people, even though they're clamoring for Back to the Future Part 4, and it's clear that it's not going to happen, and I am one of those people that think it doesn't need to happen, because like the three films are fantastic. I even love the animated series, but it just, a lot of people think that the video game that was released a few years ago on the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and that generation of consoles is like the spiritual sequel or successor to the film franchise. And it's an amazing game. I think it was 5 episodes, and I downloaded them all. I played them all multiple times. It is well done. It is fantastic. If you have, say, PlayStation 3 or 4 or any of the Xbox consoles in the last, say, like 15 years, go pick yourself up a copy of the Back to the Future video game, because it is well done. And if you want a sequel to Back to the Future Part 3, or even a successor to the franchise, this video game would be it. Like, a lot of people think that this video game from, I think it's released fairly late in the lifespan of the PlayStation 3 and or Xbox 360, but a lot of people think that this video game is like that spiritual sequel or successor to the film franchise, and I can't knock it. Like, it is really well done. If you need something to act as sort of a spiritual sequel or a successor, then that would be it. I mean, one of my favorite, just as a bonus here, one of my favorite Christopher Lloyd roles is, I loved him in Taxi, because I love Taxi in itself. You had Danny DeVito, Tony Danza, Jeff Conaway, Mary Lou Henner, and of course Christopher Lloyd, right? It's just, they were perfect. And you also had like Judd Hirsch and Andy Kaufman. Sorry, my mind drew a blank for a second. But right, like Taxi was amazing, and I loved Christopher Lloyd in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and it just, like, bringing that entire cast together, right, was just amazing for the 3 films. It was great. You know, like, I know Crispin Glover wasn't around after the first film, but it was just, or I mean, he wasn't around for all the films, I should say. I don't know, was he in 2? I can't remember, but because it's been such a little while since I've seen all the films, even though I have them at home. But I know that Crispin Glover wasn't around for all the films, but even then, like, those 3 films, and even the TV series that you may or may not know existed, I loved it, right? Like, it was just well done. The music with Huey Lewis in the News, you had the cast: Christopher Lloyd, Michael J. Fox, Leah Thompson, Tom Wilson, Crispin Glover, right? Just everybody involved. It was so well done that Back to the Future 4 doesn't need to happen, because the 3 films and everything that's gone on in the franchise, it's perfect the way it is. Please let's not reboot the franchise Hollywood in any way. It is what it is. It's perfect the way it is. Let's leave it, let it lie, and just let the fans of the franchise enjoy the series and the franchise for what it is. But there it is. There are my reasonings for why Back to the Future 4 is unnecessary and doesn't need to happen. Thanks again for watching. Please comment, like, share, and subscribe. Of course, this will probably go up in audio form as an episode of both the Beats and Speaks podcast and Yo Nostalgia. So subscribe to both those podcasts as well. Links are down in the description. Thanks again for watching. I have been Leigh Dickey. This wraps up another video. Please comment, like, share, and subscribe. Take care, and we will talk to you later. All right, Leigh Dickey signing off. Peace. Thanks for tuning in to Leigh Dickey TV. New episodes are available every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Subscribe to follow along with the fun.